It's been about 9 years since Avalanche Studios released the definitive game of the Mad Max universe, created by George Miller and Byron Kennedy. There was another Mad Max game on the NES from 1990, but let's be real, that game wasn't capturing the vibe of the films. The game was released a few months after the fourth movie in the franchise, Mad Max Fury Road, which was a big resurgence for Mad Max since the last movie released before that one was 30 years prior with Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome in 1985. The film was a smash hit. Everyone loved it. It's often regarded to as one of the best action movies of the last decade. And more importantly, it reignited the Mad Max universe to the public eye, as there were tons of people, myself included, that weren't even born when the last Mad Max movie came out. And now that a new movie in the franchise has been released in 2024 with Furiosa, a prequel of sorts to Fury Road, the franchise has seen another massive boost of eyes on it, both new and old. And with all this attention, a lot of people have not only brought up how fantastic Fury Road was, but also how fantastic the video game was, especially since a few characters from the game are also represented in this new film. With words like underrated, hidden gem, and masterpiece being thrown around a lot, it made me think back to when I played the game back in 2015, and I gotta say, I don't remember it as fondly as most other people. I remember it having fun melee and vehicle combat with cool car customization and an amazing post-apocalyptic vibe to it. But I also remember it being very repetitive and the story being kind of lackluster. In fact, I never beat the game back then. I played through the first couple of acts and dropped it. So it's got me asking, was Mad Max as good as I remember, or is it just being hyped up by nostalgic fans for the new movie? So I dropped another 40 something hours in the game, diving into everything that it has to offer, other than the now non-existent online features, and decided to give it a fresh look and see how good the game is. The premise of the game is quite simple. In this open world wasteland of a game, you play as Max. Mad Max, if you will. He's got a last name apparently, Rockatansky, which, if you didn't know, is named after the method of autopsy that removes all the internal organs in one go. Back when speed was important in dissecting bodies, I guess. Anyway, you're Max, and you're on your way to some mythical place called the Plains of Silence in order to finally forget your haunted past. You get ambushed by a group of raiders called the War Boys, led by someone named Scabarus Scrotus, the ruler of Gastown. Max puts up a hell of a fight, but eventually the War Boys outnumber him and beat him down, taking all of his supplies and his prized car and leaving him in the wasteland for dead. Even on the verge of death, Max climbs onto Scrotus's rig and fights for his car, even impaling a chainsaw into Scrotus's dense skull before he gets knocked off the big rig and left behind, with nothing but Scrotus's dog to join him, who was also kicked off because he failed to attack Max. So now you wander the wasteland in pursuit of getting your car back, finding and making allies and enemies along the way in this desolate world, but he has no desires for friends or allies. He simply just has people help him when they have something to offer him. Like Chum Bucket, he's a valuable ally on Max's journey because he's a skilled mechanic and knowledgeable of the area, and he is a means to an end. He's not a friend. All Max wants is his car and fuel and to get back to the Plains of Silence to forget everything.
How tough, how fast?
Very. Faster than fear. Tougher than an iguana's gonads.
Even though the release of the game coincided with the film, the game is not intended to be a movie tie-in game. But it did start out that way. You see, Mad Max had a pretty troubled history with video game adaptations. A game is something that was in process for quite a while, actually. After Beyond Thunderdome was released, George Miller wanted to venture into making a video game in order to expand the way that he tells the stories of this universe that he's crafted. There have been more failed and cancelled Mad Max games than there have been ones that hit the shelves. The first attempt at a game was cancelled when Hasbro saw how violent the game was going to be because I guess they didn't watch any of the movies. movies, and just thought that alliteration was fun for the kids. And the first game that did come out was kind of just a cheap knockoff game that really had nothing to do with the movies, and it wasn't received very well, giving George Miller a really bad taste for video game adaptations of his magnum opus. The studio that made this terrible NES game, Mindscape, was even developing a sequel, but WB eventually pulled the plug on their licensing for the IP before it came out. But they didn't really care that much because they still released the game under the name Outlander without really changing much. Other studios like Melbourne House under Infogrames, Brian Fargo at Interplay, and even Electronic Arts buying the rights for the IP for $20 million all gave Mad Max games a shot too, but for one reason or another everything fell through with those projects, making Mad Max kind of the Great White Buffalo IP for game developers. And I guess part of the reason EA uses so many microtransactions, because apparently they just pay $20 million for IPs that they never intend to use. Finally, in 2008, there was a breakthrough for the game that just coincidentally took place when the movie Fury Road was filming. Cory Barlog, known for directing God of War 2, was a massive fan of the Mad Max world and sat down with George Miller in order to get an actual good game made. The game was conceptualized to be very closely tied with the movie originally. Even details from the movie were altered in order to fit in with the game's story beats, like the Interceptor's spoiler being removed because the game featured that as an unlockable add-on to the car. But even this promising concept of the game was also scrapped. During the filming of the movie, abnormally heavy rain happened in Australia, leaving this desert landscape looking more like a healthy biome of water and wildflowers, not really fit for a post-apocalyptic tale. So filming was moved to Namibia, and who knows how many millions of dollars that this cost, to put all these cars and actors and film props onto boats and planes and transport them to a different continent. But it must have been a lot, because Warner Brothers put George Miller on a tight leash and made him focus on nothing else other than finishing this movie and to stop hemorrhaging their bank accounts, which means that his involvement with any kind of video game was now extinct. But that didn't necessarily stop George Miller's attempt at making his game. He reached out to Team Bondi, the Australian game studio known for LA Noire, for one last attempt at making an authentic Mad Max game, but this too also fell flat, and so did George Miller's attitude towards gaming in general. Warner Brothers, however, independently decided that a video game was still a pretty good idea, and they decided to approach game studios on their own in order to make one, since they had the rights to use the Mad Max IP, and they were funding this Fury Road project that seemed to be like a wash. Even the actors in the film didn't really know what was going on while filming Fury Road, so why not recoup some of this money by funding a video game? The studio of choice was Avalanche Studios, who worked on great action games with fiery explosions as well as vehicular combat games, so giving them a spin at a Mad Max game just made a lot of sense. There were rumors that Cory Barlog brought his Mad Max idea over to the studio to help it get started, but he was just hired there as a consultant for another unrelated project, and none of his ideas were shared regarding Mad Max. It seemed like WB was removing not only George Miller, but anyone associated with his gaming ideas from the project. George Miller had zero involvement in the Mad Max game. Avalanche had full access to George Miller's Mad Max universe ideas, plots, and characters that were all cooked up in this mind of Miller and Byron, but how these ideas were being implemented into this video game were entirely out of his control. And as you may know if you've seen the new Furiosa movie, this game contained ideas that were meant for future films, effectively spoiling future movies in Miller's repertoire. I'm not well versed enough in the Mad Max universe to go over all the liberties that WB and Avalanche took with this game, but Mad Max Bible on YouTube has a fantastic video on the full troubled history of Mad Max and video games, and it's a great watch. But as for the game being a movie tie-in, Warner Brothers decided that the game needed to be its own standalone project and not just a play the movie type game, as you see too often with movie tie-ins. They learned the value of this when they made the Batman Arkham games as well. Those games came out in the midst of the Dark Knight trilogy movies and wasn't connected to them at all, instead using the IP of Batman to make standalone story-rich experiences. The Arkham games having more impact on the gameplay as well for Mad Max, as we'll soon talk about. Unlike WB's shady backstabbing with the game against Miller, Avalanche's actual development of the game is damn near perfect. They went for a more mature and visceral tone for the story. portraying Max as traumatized and haunted by his past, being almost insane and fueled by rage, a far departure from their more lighthearted titles in the past like Just Cause 2. On the flip side, they also took notes from Just Cause 2 when focusing primarily on fun and engaging gameplay for the game over anything else. They wanted to make the game a dynamic open world environment and give players not only the tools that they need but the autonomy with them in order to create a wild world of seamless events that mesh together into a fantastic player experience in a wonderful sandbox, literally. The unique aspect of Mad Max's open world ideas is that they are entirely original when it comes to the gaming world. Instead of taking inspiration from founding post-apocalyptic titles in gaming like Fallout or Wasteland, they simply had to look at the world that Miller built because games like Fallout and Wasteland originally took inspiration from Mad Max. Avalanche's dedication to making a beautiful open world with strong gameplay and player agency was a winning move, and the reason that the game is remembered so fondly by so many people. And as a diehard fan of everything post-apocalyptic in gaming, Mad Max is one of the best to do it still to this day. With that being said, I've gone on long enough about niche gaming developments that many of you may or may not be interested in, so let's get into the meat and potatoes of this game, or should I say the dinky D meat and veggies.
Hey, you ass!
Toby.
You gonna eat all that dog food yourself?
The gameplay of Mad Max revolves around three key aspects: hand-to-hand combat, driving and vehicular combat, and open world exploration. 90% of the enemies that you kill outside of your vehicle are killed with Max's bare hands. The combat in this game is very inspired by the Batman Arkham games. Imagine Batman, but with pure hatred behind every punch thrown, and the person throwing it also has no problem killing people. In fact, he prefers it. It's such a satisfying system. Even when ganged up on in certain camps and surrounded by a dozen crazed war boys, the combat is smooth and actually quite fun. The actual moves are quite simple, like just having the option to throw light or heavy punches with simple combinations of each. And like the Arkham games, you get a little indication that an enemy is attacking, so you get the option to counter in a seamless flow of combat. As you progress in the game, you can also unlock new moves for Max to do as well, like snapping limbs on a perfectly timed counter, breaking an enemy's shield with an aggressive smashing of Max's bare fists, or shoulder checking the hell out of the first guy that you see by running full speed at him to start the fight. In addition, there's also a fury meter that Max uses as he punches sand dwellers in the face, and once it's capped up, he enters into a rage. His punches land twice as hard in a way that I can only describe as crunchy. Each blow is so visceral, and enemies even react to Max's rage by acting scared to attack him and talking about how there's red in his eyes. Also in this rage mode, you get the option to do fury executions on enemies after a few punches, and this usually involves Max snapping some poor soul's neck and then continuing to beat up on his friends. Simple fisticuffs isn't your only option either. There is an assortment of melee weapons that you can find lying around that make a good impact on skulls in its path, as well as explosive thunder sticks that can be thrown like a grenade javelin, or can also be impaled into an enemy's chest before kicking them away. But you don't have to resort to finding things scattered about in order to vary the combat. Max also carries a few select supplies on his person as well. He has some shivs that he can keep in his pocket that can be used in combat, like the fury executions. He can whip one out and slice some dude's throat before moving on to the next. And they also come in handy when fighting what the game calls top dogs, or massive roid monsters. After stunning them with a few punches, you can stab them in the neck a few times to really get the blood flowing. Also, Max has this wonderful sawed-off shotgun that you can use whenever you like to blast 1, 2, or even more bad guys away in a single shot depending on how closely they are grouped. But ammunition for it is very scarce, particularly in the early game. But as the game goes on, you can upgrade various bases around the map, and a certain side quest grants you a fresh supply of shotgun shells for your pockets every time you go back to the base. So at a little past halfway in the game, the ammo scarcity is really no longer an issue. You can also upgrade the shotgun itself itself, allowing it to have 4 barrels locked and loaded, ready for whatever Scabrous Scrotus has to throw at you. When injured, Max has a few ways to heal himself up. The most common way is with his water canteen that he keeps at the ready to fill up whenever he finds a rare water source within the game, mostly from dew collection systems at certain camps. But also there's some gourmet meals to be had that can replenish Max's health bar as well. You got your standard Dinky D canned dog food, but you can also stomp out rats or lizards that you find scurrying around for some lean protein, and also in a pinch you can grab a handful of maggots from a rotting human corpse. You know, normal health pickups that you see in video games. All this stuff in combination really gives you the opportunity to approach different camps and groups of enemies in whatever way that you see fit. Use different special abilities to kill dudes, use melee weapons you find lying around, stab some chap in the neck, shotgun some other fellows. The possibilities are endless, and it makes the combat truly never become stale. It's definitely one of the best parts of the game, but honestly, the vehicle gameplay was just as good. According to Warner Bros., when doing press for this game's pre-release, about 60% of the game is spent in a vehicle, either driving, racing, or engaging in some homicidal acts. And I can attest to that being a valid percentage when looking at how I spent most of my gameplay. But luckily, being in a vehicle in Mad Max is anything but boring. In fact, it's got to be the golden child of this whole game. There's a reason that the car is called the Magnum Opus. The game's plot revolves around this car, and as you'd expect, you start with a rust bucket that barely runs at the beginning of the game, but as you farm resources and unlock new attachments and features, the car becomes a Swiss Army knife full of gadgets that you can use to tackle any situation at hand. You can upgrade everything performance oriented, the engine, nitrous, exhaust, and suspension to traverse the barren wasteland as fast as possible. But speed shouldn't be your only concern, as there are countless threats to be encountered as you're driving around. You can upgrade the car's bumper grille, armor, and even add spikes to the wheels and body of the car in order to survive vehicular combat with other rust buckets trying to ram you into oblivion. And of course you can go on the offensive yourself, getting weapons like a harpoon gun, thunderstick launchers, and flame spitters to impale, explode, and char whoever tries to test your gangster. You get a sniper rifle too, but this isn't something that can be used efficiently when in car vs car combat. Instead, it's better used for sniping long-range threats like sniper lookouts or various defenses outside of camps. There is just something visceral and cathartic about the vehicle combats in this game. Whether it's using your harpoon to rip some dude out of the car driving beside you, or ripping off the tires so that they can't follow you anymore, or becoming a maniac straight out of Twisted Metal and slamming the nitrous while you're on your path to T-bone your next victim. And the explosions are immaculate. I don't know if any game has captured vehicular destruction as well as this game, if I'm being honest. As the game goes on, enemy vehicles get more armored and drive twice as fast, so the threat of your own car being destroyed by them is always there. Especially if you're like me and you did focus more on speed than armor because you like to go fast. The more armor you add lowers your acceleration and top speed due to the weight gain, so it's definitely a trade-off that you have to balance every time you enter into the wasteland. Luckily, you can edit your car's build on the fly as long as you aren't in combat, so if you anticipate needing some more armor, you can bolt on some sheet metal real quick to take a few more punches. The enemy AI is also something of note here. They're pretty good at reacting to your driving. They boost and brake to get around you to avoid your hits, and they also work together with other vehicles to take you off the road and pin you down. And when they destroy your car to a point where Max needs to get out so Trump can fix it, they don't just call it a day and drive off. No, they start circling you like a pack of sharks and take turns trying to ram your squishy human body. And when there's 3 or more of them, it's really hard to try to dodge them all. Driving around and fighting other cars is something that happens every time you leave one of the strongholds, and it's part of most of the missions as well. It's a vital part of the game, and it's incredibly satisfying to do even after 40 hours. It doesn't really get boring. But there are also specific objectives that lie around in this open world that require vehicles as well. So let's get into the last section of gameplay, the open world exploration. The open world of Mad Max is beautiful, full stop. It's everything that you could want from an open world game that is set in a post-apocalyptic world where water is one of the rarest resources. In fact, the majority of this map is actually the seafloor because oceans no longer exist. The developer said that they took massive inspiration from Red Dead Redemption when fleshing out this world. They wanted it to be immersive and to feel alive all on its own. And they knocked it out of the park aesthetically. The world can go from feeling barren and desolate to being intense and full of chaos in a matter of seconds. And the simple premise of a desert biome is pushed to its limits by having each area of the map have its own sort of scenery and uniqueness to it. There is no shortage of areas that feel like endless waves of sand dunes, yes, but there is also swampy areas that, instead of murky water, leak out black sludge from the ground like pus from a festering wound, or jagged rock areas full of sulfur aptly named Reek Hills. And there's even more populated areas like Gastown that are full of human waste and trash piled high. But even when you're driving along some of the more desolate areas, there is a sense of atmosphere that rivals any other post-apocalyptic world in fiction. The world is full of things to do, and this is where a lot of the cons come in for me personally with this game, because this is where most of the repetitiveness of this game lies, because there is a lot to do, but none of it is particularly interesting. This is where open worlds like Fallout or Red Dead Redemption blow Mad Max out of the water, or blow the water out of Mad Max, or I feel like there was a good joke there for this map not having any water, but I fucked it up. Anyway, there aren't any neat NPCs or cool side quests or fun collectibles or weapons or items or really anything to be found by exploring this map. It's just the same 5 or 6 things copy and pasted ad nauseum across the whole map. It's the same problem that I had with games like Mafia 3. Such a cool themed world that is beautifully designed and filled with nothing to do and no reason to explore it. The world map is divided into large territories that are owned, for lack of a better term, by one individual, and each territory is divided into different regions. So for example, the first stronghold that you encounter is run by a man named Jeet, and the area surrounding his stronghold is labeled as Jeet's territory, and this territory is broken down into 5 regions: Fuel Veins, Dry Gusty, Colossus, Black Maws, and Balefire Flatland. There is also Gut Gash's territory and Pink Eye's territory that also have 5 regions within them as well as other unique territories like the Dump and the Dunes, which don't have regions within them, but they are still rather large and full of objectives. Each region is full of different things for Max to do. Most of them are called threats, as they are extensions of Scabrous Scrotus's reign onto each territory. So as you go through these territories, you have the option to lower the threat level by taking down these threats. Think of the Far Cry games where you reveal a region by climbing a tower. In Mad Max's case, you fly up in a hot air balloon and then you see a lot of the threats available in that region. There are scarecrows, which are monuments of scrap and dead bodies that can be rammed with your car or ripped down with your harpoon. There are snipers' nests, which can be taken out in the same ways or shot down with the sniper in the back of Max's car. There are convoys, which are groups of heavily armored cars escorting a truck carrying fuel, and you have to fight through the cars protecting the truck and destroy the truck as well, which gives you a unique hood ornament that boosts a certain stat on your car. There are minefields that can only be defused safely by using a certain vehicle that has a dog companion in the back instead of Chum Bucket. The dog reveals the mines and allows Max to disarm them. And finally, there are camps. Camps are the main threats for each region and involve Max infiltrating the defenses on the outside before making his way to the inside, fighting dozens of men and destroying whatever resources are held there, like oil pumps or oil transfer cases. There are also camps called Top Dog camps that don't hold particular resources but instead hold skilled fighters operating under a leader that is enough of an intimidating presence that their existence alone counts as a threat to the region.
Just so I can pleasure myself with your twitching corpse.
Same goes for stank gum camps. Camps full of fighters covered in colorful paint that are quite the step up in skill level from your typical war boy, all operating under their leader Stank Gum, or Scrotus's right-hand man. Camps are a lot of fun to go into, as you can approach them in various different ways, using Max's full repertoire to kill as many people as possible and just flexing every new skill unlock that you got on swarms of bad boys. Camps are also the only place that you find war criers, which are these guys that are suspended above a big fight area that, well, do war cries that give a combat buff to all the enemies there. You can kill them immediately before the fight starts, which makes the fight easier, but it's almost more fun to kill all the bad guys first and then leave them hanging there alone, as they just kind of stop playing the drums once everyone's dead and clear their throat, like, you know, none of this was personal, right? But most of your time spent exploring the world involves destroying these various threats, and each region has several of each. And with 15 plus regions, you can see how having only a few options of things to do can get quite repetitive. Now, you don't have to destroy every threat in every region. You can go about your business and play the game's story missions and ignore the exploration. But I am an OCD gamer when it comes to task lists. So if I have a list of things in the area to do, I'ma spend hours doing them and ignore the plot. There are rewards for lowering the territory's threat level. You get bonuses in each stronghold, and you also unlock new car parts to slap on your magnum opus. So being a completionist does have its perks to the gameplay. But there are other things to do in each region that don't revolve around these threats, and by other things I mean two things. One is death races, which are, as they sound, races and death. They reward you with skill points if you complete them fast enough, and they're pretty fun. I like how you can totally just destroy all your opponents with zero regard for penalty in the race. Like most other games, even if it's a game about murdering people, if you try to shoot your opponents during a race, the race is usually failed. And Mad Max, it's fucking Mad Max. You can murder every other car in the race, making first place guaranteed every time. There are also online leaderboard races, but the WB servers got shut down years ago, so I couldn't really play these at all. The second thing to do is to go to Scrap Loot location. In this world, scrap is currency. Every upgrade that you do to Max himself or your car takes scrap. And as you get to higher and higher quality upgrades, the scrap costs get quite up there. Each scrap location varies quite a bit. Some are just small caves or tents with a single piece of scrap, and some are mini camps with half a dozen enemies and several pieces of scrap. There isn't just scrap there either. There can also be upgrade resources for the strongholds in each region, or historic relics, which is this game's collectible. It's a picture or some kind of note that reminds Max of the old world, and they are completely inconsequential. Just cool world building items to grab and something for completionists to hunt down.
I doubt a fiberglass helmet would stop a bullet. Yeah, he probably didn't survive long.
Some of the locations are also some cool Easter eggs that are a lot of fun. I found this house buried in the dunes that I'm fairly certain is Max Payne's house. The wallpaper in this kid's room is familiar, and the corpse on the bed is posed like Max's wife. I could be wrong, as I couldn't find a reference to this Easter egg anywhere online, and it may be a reference to something else entirely, or not a reference to anything at all, but to me, it kind of reminded me of Max Payne's house from the first Max Payne game. There is also storms that happen randomly across the wasteland, powerful surges of energy with heavy winds that blow large debris, and lightning strikes that can obliterate your car. You are advised to seek shelter and avoid them when they start up, but you can also treat them like an artifact anomaly in the Stalker games, where you can risk the potential hazards and in turn get some nice loot. Although in this game, the only loot to be had is scrap, so it's nothing too exciting, but it is a large amount of scrap. For each storm loot box that you break open, there is about 100 scrap in there, which is pretty significant when you find less than half of that at most loot locations. I always drove out into the storms when they showed up, but more often than not, they did fuck me right up, but still worth it. The strongholds in each area also have objectives within them. You can upgrade each one by finding those resources and camps that I mentioned, allowing you to build an oil tank, water storage, or maggot farm, which can replenish your fuel, canteen, and health bar every time you go back to the base, so it makes it worthwhile to do so. But also there's other neat ones, like the survey crew, which reveals different scrap locations to you on the map, cleanup crew, which automatically collects scraps from cars that you destroy, and then there's the scrap crew, which is supposed to collect scrap for you while you're offline, but as the WB servers are down, this feature no longer works, so it's useless. It's also cool seeing how the stronghold is advanced every time you complete an upgrade. When you first get there, people are sickly and lying around, and the place looks like shit, and then you fix up a few things and give them access to food and water storage, and all of a sudden the place is popping. People are happier, hopeful even, and the place starts to look rather respectable. A cool detail in the game that I thought was a nice touch. Each stronghold also has its fair share of side missions as well, that give Max scrap or special loot or features, like several missions given by Jeet for Max to find a wastelander that is rumored to know how to make gunpowder named Blast Cap, and then also find resources around the map that he needs to make said gunpowder. A multi-part mission series, but it results in each camp refilling Max's ammunition, making using your shotgun a lot less taxing on resources. And I'll discuss some substantial side missions when I go over the plot of the game, which I suppose is right now, so spoilers ahead for all those concerned for the story of this game.
There you are.
Lungs still heaving, heart still beating. Yet you refuse to live. Perhaps you've forgotten who you are.
The game starts with one of the coolest transitions from the main menu right into the action. After selecting New Game, you are thrown into the background image of the menu and the scene begins. It's a really nice touch. The scene shows Max being ambushed by warboys that want to steal his car, and it shows how efficient Max is at defending himself, or killing others. 6 of one, half a dozen in the other. The voiceover describes Max as a man who has lost his sanity, and he's on a never-ending journey to find peace and silence away from the hauntings of his past. He's on his way to a place called the Plains of Silence, a mythical place that can supposedly help him finally forget. He has everything that he needs to get there except the fuel, so that's where we catch up with Max for this story. He's on his journey to Gastown in order to grab fuel. Unlucky for Max, Gastown is run by one Scabarus Scrotus, son of Immortan Joe, and he leads an army of ruthless warboys that kill and scrap anything in their territory, and Max falls into that category of anything at this moment. They eventually get the better of Max and beat him down, as Scrotus himself arrives and loads Max's car up onto his massive rig to take it away. Max isn't down for the count though. He picks himself up and jumps onto Scrotus's rig and fights with everything he's got. Scrotus sicks his dog on Max, but when Max deflects his attack, Scrotus then beats his dog and throws him overboard, leaving just the two of them in a one-on-one fight. And even though Scrotus is much larger and has a pole saw, Max still gives him the old 1-2 and beats his ass, even turning his own weapon against him and shoving that chainsaw blade right into Scrotus's thick skull. But that doesn't instantly kill him somehow, and he picks Max up and throws him off of the war rig. So now Max is left stranded for real in the middle of nowhere. No food, no water, no clothes, and no car. He's woken up by the dog that previously tried to attack him, and they seem to become quick allies as both are battered and left for dead, so why not work together? Max scavenges some clothes and a canteen off some poor soul left in the waste, and he also finds a pipe gun in the sand after the dog sniffed it out. The dog also soon leads Max to water, so that they can both get a much needed drink. And as the dog ventures on ahead of Max in search of some food, it's captured by a hunchbacked man named Chum Bucket, who is delighted at getting his next meal.
Chum Bucket, this man will you acquire gently.
But quickly Max intervenes, and Chum is immediately in awe of him. He says he saw Max get attacked by the warboys and left for dead, and he says that Max is a driver of some prophecy, sent to him in order to help him build and drive a vehicle of legend that he calls the Magnum Opus. So Chum Bucket is now Max's second ally, although Max only seems to partner with Chum in order to get his car back, since Chum is also a master mechanic that suits this job just right. Because as they ride back to Chum's hideout, they spot Max's car being scrapped in a nearby camp. It's already long gone, with the V8 engine probably being sent up to Gastown, as Scrotus likes to keep all the good parts for himself. But this is where Chum tells Max that he can build him this legendary car, the Magnum Opus. The car right now is, well, not a car, it's
just a mess of parts.
But Chum's got a master divine plan for making this opus, and Max is pretty instantly sold on the idea. The first step is getting a body for this chassis. So they ride out to a place called the Graveyard, a place under control of the creepy faction called the Buzzards that only come out from underground at night. They have a bunch of car bodies held at this graveyard, so once you get there you make your choice of body and then you make a run for it. The next step is for Chum Bucket to gather the parts needed to build a harpoon gun that'll help for combat and ripping gates off of camps and all that jazz. And he also has the tip to the harpoon stored in his bunk for reasons. And once it's attached to the car, you then use it to rip down some scarecrows and infiltrate your first camp. Inside this camp, as you're killing all the bad guys, you come across a stranger in the shadows, someone that you've seen before already in the very beginning of the game, but now he tells you to come see him when your spirit is ready. You don't know it now, but this guy is named Griffa, who is like a spiritual guide for Max. Functionally, he's a way to spend your experience points in the game, or Griffa tokens, to rank up different attributes and skills, but we'll get a formal introduction once we finish out this camp. You climb to the top of a large rock and talk with him there, and he seems to know Max and his past for some reason, and he mentions the Plains of Silence and everything. Every time you meet with Griffa, he covers some introspection into Max's psyche, some words of guidance and wisdom before blowing some dust in his face and allowing you to spend whatever Griffa tokens that you have. And after spending them, Max wakes up on his hands and knees, and the first time I thought this was a cutscene and just waited for something to happen. I just sat there for probably like 30 or 45 seconds, but really you just have to start moving and Max will get up. But now the car is taking its shape, but Max still wants his big engine. But that requires going to Gastown, which he isn't really ready for, as Chum lets him know. He'll need better armor and weapons to do that. As they're having this conversation in Chum's hideout, it gets ambushed by scavengers, as they probably saw them driving back there recently. These scavengers are under the control of Stank Gum, one of Scrotus's top men, and a violent psychopath as well. He has Chum's hideout destroyed while he dances in the chaos. This leaves Max in need of a place to rebuild, and the only place Chum has in mind is Jeet's stronghold. Jeet isn't exactly the charitable type, but he lets Max and Chum stay at his place as long as Max does some work for him as well, primarily by lowering Scrotus's threats in his territory. Max also tells Jeet about his plans to get to Gastown, and Jeet laughs directly in his face and says that he wouldn't make it past the jaw, which is a big doorway with a giant metal jaw that blocks its path. So for the next several hours, you go around destroying camps and scarecrows and doing a few side quests, like going back to Chum's hideout and seeing if the dog made it out alive, and helping Jeet find a manufacturer for gunpowder. You also learn of another leader in the area named Gutgash, a potential ally similar to Jeet that can offer Max another stronghold to build up in and offer him access to heavy metal plating to be used as armor. In this new territory, it's more of the same. Lower the threat level and do side missions in order to gain the favor of its leader, in this case Gutgash, who happens to make his living by selling slaves. And one of these slaves is a red-haired woman named Hope, who catches Max's eye, but he has no time for distractions here, so he doesn't really help her out. She does tell him of some treasure that was lost when she was ambushed on the road though, and if you wish to search that out, you'll get some nice loot. Gutgash also asks you a few favors. He needs dense steel, and he asks you to dig out an old subway car in the tunnels, and he asks you to raise the morale of his stronghold by getting a sign from the old days, a relic of the water gods, a sign that great water once existed and it will soon return again. It's a billboard with a lobster on it. Once Max has earned enough respect from Gutgash, he is told of a harpoon tip that is strong enough to rip down the jaw, but it's being used as a hood ornament on some convoy in his area. So Max has to take down this convoy and build this strong harpoon to move on. And this also helps out Gutgash too, as this convoy was a massive threat to his territory. Once you have this upgraded jag tip, you're also told by Jeet that you'll need some black magic as well to destroy the hinges on the jaw. And since you've helped him source some black powder materials, he teaches you how to make an explosive grenade launcher weapon called the Thunderpoon that can do heavy damage to vehicles and hinges to massive jaw-shaped gates. With all that done, the jaw is able to be destroyed and the dead barons are now accessible to Max and Chum, one step closer to Gastown. The first order of business is to touch base with the stronghold in this region, and that'd be a lady named Pink Eye. But when you arrive at her base, it's being attacked by Stank Gum and his men, so you head in and help out in the ambush. Can we just take a second to appreciate the awesome names in this game and the Mad Max universe in general? Scabarous Scrotus, Gutgash, Pink Eye, Stank Gum. Such an awesome world to be in. Anyway, once you're inside the stronghold, you witness Stank Gum and Pink Eye in a standoff. Max tries to sneak up and take down Stank Gum, but he's followed by one of his painted soldiers. Luckily, he has a helping hand. The prisoner lady, Hope from Gutgash's, seems to have been sold to Stank Gum, and she's taking a liking to Max, so she helps him out by slicing the approaching soldier's throat, but this leads to a brawl. Stank Gum eventually escapes with Hope in tow, but Max's act of kindness lands well in getting into Pink Eye's good graces. I honestly don't know what good Pink Eye offers you in your quest to get your V8 engine. There are no main plot points that revolve around her. She's just another stronghold to beef up and territory to lower threats in. She has a few side quests to offer that do offer some neat perks, like tires, but really all you do is help her and her people build a boat car thing and sail off into the big nothing. For sure just dying out there once they run out of water. At one point, Chum gets word of some races going on in Gastown, and the reward for winning is none other than the V8 engine. So with all the regions unlocked and nothing in your way, we make our way to Gastown and meet with the race coordinator. He tells Max that he'll need to work his way up to being in the races, and it'll only take him a couple years, but obviously Max isn't waiting.
No time, Jawbone. I need to join the races now.
The guy gives Max a job in exchange for joining the races now. This race coordinator has these little blinky lights on his clothing and they are fading. So he asks Max to go get him some new lighties. And the only place to do that is a death sentence. Deep underground in an airport buried by the sand in the land of the buzzards called the Underdunes. This is a pretty creepy part of the game. Lots of atmospheric horror going on, bumps and shadows running by for most of Max's journey into the depths. But once he reaches the lights, it's an all-out brawl and fight for survival on his ride out. He gives the race coordinator his lighties and secures a spot in the races. The only thing he needs now is a partner, to which Chum says that he can't help with because he isn't able to fight as well as others in the race, which is odd because he's the only partner that I've had this whole game, and I've killed tons of enemies. But anyway, we head off to find some washed up fighter smoking her life away in a drug den. Her name is Tenderloin, and she's charming. And you just have to win a death race to repay her debts, and she's on your team for the Gastown races. In Gastown, you also find Hope again. She's in a cage and she still tries to help Max out in an attempt to gain his trust. She tells him of her old owner's stash of goodies, including his prized war rig, and where it's held up. It's a chariot that belongs to Dementis, who, if you've seen the new Furiosa movie, you know exactly who that is. Max still doesn't free her from her cages, even after getting this sweet ride. Anyway, now it's time to do this big race and win your V8 engine and get back to the Plains of Silence. We're in the end game now. The race is pretty straightforward. It's a time attack race against a bomb that's ticking in your back seat, and all you have to do is destroy Stankum and his V8 monster truck before the bomb blows up. But once you do, the challenge isn't quite over. You see, there can only be one champion, and since you and Tenderloin won together, one of you has to go. So now you're forced to fight your new companion to the death. Once Max is the champion, he's told he's going to be congratulated by the boss, and he's on the way down.
Who the hell is he?
The leader of Gastown is who it's always been. Big Bad Scabarous Scrotus, still alive and well with the chainsaw still planted in his frontal lobe. It's not like he needs it anyway, old Phineas Gage over here. Anyway, Scrotus recognizes Max and shit hits the fan. He fights with him with the passion of 1,000 suns, and you can't really blame him. Max did chainsaw his noggin, but Max also gets the better of him once again, until Stankgum interferes and shoots Max with a crossbow, leading him to be knocked through the floor by Scrotus and sent into the depths of Gastown, most people assuming him dead. But Hope runs to his rescue. She brings him to the medic in the sewers, who hooks Max up to a blood bag in order to heal him back up. And during this healing process, Max has some crazy dreams. He sees his dead wife, who then turns into Hope, and they get married, with the wedding being officiated by Dinky D the dog, and Chum Bucket being the best man. It's all a little crazy, but hey, near-death experiences usually are. Once Max wakes up though, he rips out his blood bag line and storms back up to Gastown in search of Hope, as she knows where Stankum keeps his car. Hope is hiding out in the stronghold in the dumps region run by a guy named Deep Fryer, who looks like he's named that because he was dropped into a deep fryer. He's like Pink Eye in that doing missions for him doesn't really help Max in the grand scheme of things, like getting his V8 engine, but they do offer some perks if you wish to do some side quests, like kill traitors of Fryer's group and turn the gas pipes on so he can burn his holy flame once again. But the real reason you're here is to get Hope to help you find Stankum's car, so you can take back what is rightfully yours. At this point, Hope finally asks for Max's help in return for all the help that she's given him. She wants her daughter named Glory back. She's been taken by an old man to safety when Max won the races and chaos hit Gastown, and she needs Max to go get her back. She lets Max into Stankum's garage and he gets away with the Big Chief, the big V8 engine that he's been after this whole time. He has what he needs and he can just hit the road, but he's a man of his word and he decides to help Hope get her daughter back. Well, I mean, he does try to just drive off, but Hope eventually talks or guilts him into helping her get her daughter back. She even uses her wasteland concubine charm and kisses him, and Max even tells her his name for the first time in the whole game that it's been used.
Max. My name is Max.
She gives him a snow globe, something that Glory will recognize and let her know that Max is helping her mother. So Max heads off to the dunes to find Glory. He comes across the old man that was escorting Glory to safety, and now he's dead, with Glory nowhere to be seen. But since this is Buzzard Land, it's fairly obvious where she ended up. Chum says the buzzards take children and use them to dig tunnels and holes for scrap, so Glory likely is a slave inside of their base. So back into the Underdunes we go for one last quest. Instead of lighties, Max is looking for a little girl named Glory. Once they get inside though, Max heads off on foot into the base, and Chum is heard yelling in the distance that there are buzzards coming, and he storms out of there back to Deep Fryas, leaving Max underground alone with no car. Max eventually finds Glory and rescues her, stealing a buzzard car and making it all the way back to Deep Fryas. Hope and Glory have a touching reunion, but Max immediately notices that Chum is missing, and so is the magnum opus. Deep Fryas said that Chum brought it back to where it was born, so Max heads that way. But before he leaves, he's asked by Hope to just drop it, and to live a life with the two of them. Stop pursuing whatever he's after, and settle down. And Max says, fuck that shit, and drives off to Chum's old hideout. He gets there a tad too late though, as Stankgum followed Chum as he left the dumps because he noticed his shiny V8 engine was missing. So Max arrives to a beaten and bloody Chum bucket and an angry Stankgum in the hideout. Stankgum is mad that Max stole not only his engine, but his girl too. And he says he's mad about Max running a saw into Scrotus's brain too, but I don't really think Stankgum cares about that too much. Anyway, Stankgum is here to fight once and for all. So you brawl him to the death, and as you're beating his face in, he tells you that Scrotus found out about Max's happy little family, a woman and a girl, and he's probably killing them right now, and he likes to take his time when he's killing.
He's there right now, killing him slow, in all sorts of tasty ways.
So Max gets into the car immediately, running down Stankgum for good as he leaves, and he races back to Deep Fryas. But again, he is too late. Scrotus is done. Hope is strung up from the ceiling, and Glory dies in Max's arms once he gets there. And this reignites the hatred inside of Max, re-traumatizing him all over again from the loss of his family that he was originally trying to forget. So now, before Max fucks off to the Plains of Silence, he must kill Scabarous Scrotus. He has to pay for what he's done. In order to find out where Scrotus is, he goes back to the Warboy blood bag that brought him back to life. As a member of Scrotus's war party, would be the only person to know where he is. And since the blood bag now hates Scrotus for leaving him as a vessel to heal others, he would be willing to give up his location. The blood bag sees Max as an extension of himself, as his blood runs through him, and as such he wants Max to get revenge on Scrotus for him, for locking him up and being used as a blood bag. So he does in fact give Max the location of Scrotus. And the first portion of this boss fight is like your standard convoy destruction mission, but once the main war rig is out of commission and nearly driven off of a cliff, Max is tempted to ram into the war rig with the magnum opus to send it flying off into the depths and destroy Scrotus once and for all. But of course, this would also destroy the magnum opus in the process. Chumbucket realizes this and sits on the hood in an attempt to stop Max from killing the car. But Max at this point does not give a single fuck about Chumbucket or the car, and he goes full speed ahead with the magnum opus. Slamming it into the war rig and sending it off of the cliff, obliterating Chumbucket in the process. Max does seem slightly saddened to watch Chum burn and eventually explode with the rest of the wreckage, but he may also just be concerned because soon after Scrotus comes flying out of the back in Max's old car, ready to run down the now carless Max. Max has to scramble around for thundersticks left on the ground in the wreckage in order to throw them at his stolen interceptor and put a stop to Scrotus once and for all. The whole time he is haunted by voice lines of the now dead Chum Bucket, Hope, and Glory, all telling Max to kill Scrotus once and for all. Eventually, Max flips the car, sending Scrotus flying to the ground, and he's impaled with a giant piece of metal that Max kicks further into his belly. But he is of course still not dead. He is Scrotus, the immortal after all. So Max tries to rip the chainsaw out of his skull while fighting against this roid monster that was just crawling and dying, gasping for breath on the ground. But eventually Max rips it out, leaving a giant gaping wound in Scrotus' skull, killing him finally. At least, I think so. Max then hops into his interceptor and puts the picture of his old family on the dashboard and speeds off to where he was trying to go all along, the Plains of Silence, to forget everything. And that's pretty much it. A story that started off pretty straightforward with Max running from his past, only to get sidetracked by some asshole stealing his car, and in the process of getting his car back, he gathers even more trauma to fuel his rage and motivation to drive off into nothingness and forget. There was really no plot for the first 90% of the game. It was simply Max trying to farm up car parts in order to drive on this mission to forget everything. But once he caught some feelings for Hope and Glory and then lost them almost immediately after, he was forced to kill the big bad Lord Scrotus before he could move on. Not much in the way of narrative, really. I mean, those moments are literally the last 2 missions of the game, but man, those final scenes definitely made you feel some type of way. Max speeding up to the cliff's edge right after finding Hope and Glory slain was some intense shit, and it really got you pumped to go into that final mission.
Kill them. I want you to paint my name in their blood across the lands.
Where is he? Burn through your veins. Where is he? Where is he?
I think the story of this game was more than serviceable. It was entertaining and rich with characters and dialogue, and even though there was no supremely well-written plot going on, the game was a ton of fun and made you feel things in all the right moments. And I can totally see it being a dope 15-hour experience if you just mainline the story missions and didn't get sucked into the side content and scrap farming. But let's be real, the star of the show here is still the gameplay and the world design. It's damn near perfect in gameplay and aesthetics of the world. If only there were more to do in this beautiful world that didn't fall into repetitive busywork. All in all, I regret not finishing the game back in the day. I think I was just really tired of open world games that had endless objectives and checklists to do, so I just dropped it shortly after starting it up. But I wish that I stuck with it, because the combat loops only get better as you unlock more abilities, and the same with the car combat. And the game offers a ton of cool set pieces as well in most of the missions that I didn't get to. So does the game Mad Max live up to the hype that it's been receiving over the past couple of weeks? Yeah, I think so. It's a solid 7 out of 10 game that is tons of fun and has a lot to offer. As for why I think the game wasn't as successful as it deserved, well, for one, it released on the same exact day as Metal Gear Solid 5, which I can only imagine wasn't great for the shelf space offered to this game. And on top of that, most people probably thought this was a movie tie-in game for Fury Road, so on that basis alone, I think a lot of people passed it up. But ultimately, I think not having George Miller involved was the biggest misstep in the project. The game would have had a better storyline and even better world building, and side content thrown in everywhere, if Miller was able to make the video game adaptation that he's been waiting decades to make. At a press conference for Furiosa, George Miller was asked about the Mad Max game, and he was quoted as saying, "The game was not as good as he wanted it to be. It was out of his hands, and essentially Avalanche just took his Mad Max material and made what they wanted with it, and had no care for the overarching lore of the universe." But he ended the statement by mentioning that he would still be interested in making another Mad Max game, and he'd love for Kojima to work on it with him, which oddly enough could actually happen one day, as Kojima is a massive Mad Max fan and has cited George Miller as one of his biggest influences in making his stories. So who knows, maybe we'll get a Kojima Productions Mad Max project in the future. Maybe that was Kojima's plan all along, since his Metal Gear Solid 5 is part of the reason that the game flopped. At least per former Avalanche director Christopher Sundberg, who said that the game was doomed due to the competing release date. Sundberg also tweeted out after Miller's interview saying that they had a DLC for the game fully completed, just sitting, waiting for the green light, but Warner Bros. Shut them down and decided not to release anything else for the game, blaming Avalanche for the poor sales of the game even though they made a good product. You gotta love those scumbag corporations, shooting themselves in the foot only to blame everyone else for their missing toes. This game had a troubled start and a troubled ending, and I don't think we'll ever see another Mad Max installation from Avalanche Studios, but who knows? Maybe the Road Warrior will make it to the gaming market once again. I hope that it will. It's got all the substance needed to make a fantastic game, you just need the right minds to work on it and to make something fun. But for God's sakes, please let George Miller direct his own universe in gaming for one time. But before I head off, I'd like to thank all my patrons and YouTube members for holding it down. Doc Schwinn, Kid Kingpin, Snowflake, Zachary Parkerson, Not Much, Anonymous Starkweather, Crash Bandicoot 25, Ben Stevens, Potty, Yay Man, Alfred Correa, Kenneth Butler, Ethan Carpenter, Matthew Taylor, Scribe Slendy, Nick the Brosa, Nico Mendez, Dylan Klink, Frankie Hammer, Peanutso Holland, Grizzly Wizzly, Sexy Pickles, Forgem Nas, and Shotgun Minister. As always, thank you for watching. I hope to see you next time. Peace.